I know you sort of grew your rugby league roots in York before coming and playing for Blackpool Stanley when you were at university there. I honestly couldn't tell you any of York's current centres, and that's just because I've not been following the Championship that much in the last year. Who are your favourite centres around rugby league right now?
In all honesty, I'd be pick any names out. Well, still being pretty new to it, I struggle to follow it. I don't get much chance to watch it.
Too busy on the front line.
Far too busy.
Yeah, we'll go with that.
Working too hard. Well, when you're not working, you've got a great opportunity to catch up on a load of archives of old games, and you might pick up some of the names that Brett, as a fellow Wigan fan, I'm sure you've got plenty of great centres that you've watched over the years that you want to sort of give a shout out for.
Definitely. So probably I was too young, I think. I remember vaguely being at Central Park when I was really young. Before obviously it was knocked down. And my very first Wigan shirt had Tweeter Marler on the back of it. I remember that well. But for me, growing up watching it in my teens at Wigan, I think George Carmont stood out to me when I was a season ticket holder back in the day watching him play. I think he just did everything you'd want from a centre. He was just solid. He scored tries, set them up, was hard in D. Just an all-round, one of them players that you just knew would never have a bad game. So definitely enjoyed watching Carmont play back in the day.
Yeah, he's a club legend, isn't he? Definitely.
Yeah, definitely.
So Brett, as the coach, at your side, what about in your own side? What do you expect from the centres? What do you expect from that position when you're coaching them up?
Centre for me, just I like quite a big centre, strong runners, solid in defence. But it can kind of create something out of nothing, but also not too greedy, and they can kind of set the wingers up as well. But yeah, like I said, that's willing to do the hard work as well, come in to relieve a bit of pressure, take a few runs from half back. But yeah, I think probably our centres, you could probably play them centre or second row really. So like to have a big centre that can kind of bust over on the short side, but also got a silky pair of hands that can tip it onto the winger and open them up as well a bit.
Yes, basically you're not expecting too much, but you want them to be able to do everything.
Not much. For me, I think I played at centre once, and I think it's probably one of the hardest positions to play in terms of defence, because you're in that situation a lot of times, aren't you, where you don't know whether to bite or kind of stick, and you're often isolated on your own. I think you've got to be a good one-on-one tackler at centre, whereas I think further infield, you kind of often gang tackling, but at centre, I think you've got to have that right in D.
Yeah, almost as it slides out defensively,
yeah.
Decision making needs to almost improve by the position, and centre's maybe the key one, isn't it? Because what the centre does, the winger has to follow as well.
Exactly.
And if the centre makes the wrong choice, they have to make that tackle. Otherwise, they're going to be watching the guys go the other way and score a try past them.
That's the one, yeah. I'd rather be in the middle with everyone else. Just stick me in the middle of some props, and that'll be all right.
Well, if you got Andy by your side doing all the minutes for
that's
you,
what I do. I just stick to Andy. Yeah, all the autographs.
That's great. And I suppose just to finish up a little bit, kind of with you, Andy, I wanted to ask you what is it like at the moment? Working at spirits quite high at the hospital, or is it is it kind of a good atmosphere, or obviously it's a scary time, but everyone just is grateful for what you do. I'm not really got a question for you. I just want to say everyone's grateful for what you guys are doing.
Well, no, it is a good atmosphere at the hospital actually. Everyone's kind of sticking together and just trying to get everyone through it really. Well, yeah, it's hard work, and it is a little scary having, there are people dying in hospital, and it's horrible knowing that's going on around you, and people are experiencing some really horrible things on the COVID wards, but they're getting the breaks and they're getting the support that they need, and it's fantastic. And tell you what, there is so many free biscuits going. The step rooms are just full of food. It's great.
You can stop pretty much any open food outlet between the hospital and home as well, I'm imagining, and pick up what you need to get yourself fueled up for the runs and the bike rides and everything else that you're doing to raise the money for the club and for the NHS. So absolutely outstanding stuff, guys. That's fantastic. Thanks for being along, being part of the show, and hopefully, you get your season back on track soon, and you guys get to be out there on the pitch doing what you enjoy most of all.
Nice one, thank you, mate.
So yeah, excellent stuff. Really nice to talk to the two guys there. Sorry if some of the connection was a little bit shaky, but we battled through, and they gave some good insight on the grassroots game in the sort of periphery areas to the heartlands. So thanks to those guys. Do get behind their 5,000 metre challenger if you can. They're coming to a close on that as you'll be listening to this. Thanks for them too, leading into our chat about centres, which we're going to move on to next, and that's going to start as well with a visit from our old friend Nate Gladden from the Rugby League in America podcast. So after the music, we'll be chatting centres. So Nate, we've been having a chat for your podcast, the Rugby League in America podcast. We might as well have a bit of a chat for the Super League pod as well. And on this week's episode, we're talking about the centre position. So I just wanted your view, I suppose, on who your favourite centres are, past, present, around the world.
Centres is a fun one for me because I kind of like, so from a new age standpoint, to kind of give people an idea of who I like Ronaldo Mulatalo and Bronson Cherry, the Sharks players that are centers that are almost like they run like wings, but they're kind of built like that new age center in the sense of like now. So I kind of like those younger ones that are there. Traditional speaking though, I mean, I liked obviously I like Greg Inglis, big fan of somebody like Greg Inglis. When we're talking about South America, like Southern Hemisphere down there. On the north end, it's funny. That's the one position it's really funny. The Northern Hemisphere game, the game over in England, I love watching lock, second row. I love watching all the forwards like that. I love seeing, the different ones. The centers to me have always been kind of a come and go. With that said, I know he's a Leeds guy, but like Keith Senior, players like that, they're kind of cool,
yeah.
Right? Like
it seems like you like a tough ball running, bigger kind of centre. I do. Like, rather than the sort of wiry, steppy kind of guys that we tend to get in our competition.
So what's funny is I do like the big guys. So the guys they have now, like down there, they're kind of like turning into that like real like speed power kind of thing. I think the reason why I like that in the center position is because the center position reminds me of American football.
Okay.
And so I loved growing up. I loved big power eye football running backs. So I loved to watch like Jerome Bettis. Like I love watching guys like that. Like to me, those were fun. Now, of course, like a Barry Sanders is fun, but somebody like that's big. So when I see like a Keith Senior or somebody like that, or even somebody, he was kind of scrappy, but I always liked watching John Bateman when he was playing center.
Well, he's in a weird way. That's kind of even though he's not the biggest body guy, it's a forward playing in the centre, so it's a bigger body in the centre again, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. I like that. I like the idea of like a very crafty and creative, just like I love like George Williams when he was there last year. So I love that kind of a fast, fun, front foot kind of guy playing in the halves, but with somebody that can just pound in that center spot, but they can pound to the outside shoulder. They can open up those lanes for those exciting runs on the wing.
So you see the center as a running back?
Almost. 100%. Yeah. I do. I see him as an outside shoulder style running back. You use those backs those halves to dazzle, and then you've got the wings to cash in the checks at the end, and do their hair in the mirror. But like you use those centers to really like open up and pound and spread out that team on the on the sides. Like to me, those are the style guys I like. So I always look for that kind of guy. It doesn't matter what level they're at or where they play.
So who in the American game then right now are the sort of centers, that played for maybe the top teams last season?
So in Brooklyn, the players that played there, he mainly played down in the second row. It's funny. So he kind of did the John Bateman role, would be Jamil Robinson, right? Jamil can play wing, he can play center, but he could play lock and he could play second row. But the two guys for that team, they didn't necessarily always play center, but I thought they were really good there. They had the ability to be really good there. Would have been Kevin Reed Jr. and Jamil Robinson, who could play forward and back. They could really bust you in the face when they ran the ball, and then they could get away from you once they broke loose.
Yeah, big and fast.
Yeah, big and fast. So those boys are fun to watch. I think if you watch the White Plains Wombats, they have a guy, George Reese, and he's a big dude and he's a very fit guy, but he likes to run forward and hit. And then if you get a chance to go back and watch the game last year, if you want somebody that's just filthy in that kind of style, is go watch the LA Mongrel play the San Francisco Savage, and Langi Hao Puyakui. I think I just totally butchered his name. I just
say it fast and you get away with it.
That's it. That's exactly. So Langi played center for the San Francisco Savage. It'll be very easy to recognize the first time you realize that he puts somebody out on the field. He hits like a hammer. And he runs powerful. He's a big body that played in the centers, and he just knocks people over. I'm a big fan of that kind
of a Conrad Hurrell type.
Yes, like that. I'm a big fan. So I think Langi was good, and then I think there'll be some good ones coming up in the next couple of years. Delaware is that team that plays that style. I like what Delaware's doing. I'm telling you, they're the team that's – and Tampa. Tampa is – built around their forwards, but the backs that they produce are kind of big. They've got some guys that have that ability. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, I think they're good.
That's great to always get your view, Nate, when we can, because you always throw out names, obviously, that we don't know so much about, but you never know. One day we might hear more about some of these guys. So thanks for your input, as always. Yeah, man. Appreciate it. Awesome stuff. So that's great stuff. Thanks to Nate for his valuable contribution as always. As ever with Nate, you're going to hear a couple of names that we've never heard before, but hopefully some of these American stars can make it big and we can hear more from them in the future. I'm pretty sure the next bunch of names that we're going to get through some of these other listener inputs, guys, are names that we've definitely heard over and over again. So Sarah, why don't you start with St. David's?
Yep. So St. David Powell said, talking about centres, he said it's a tough one. In order: Big Mal Meninga, Greg Inglis, Paul Newlove, and Jamie Lyne. Some definitely some big names there.
I mean, you start with arguably the two greatest, certainly of the last 40 years from the Australian side of things, and then a couple of real St. Helens stars that they've seen as well. I mean, Meninga had a spell at Saints, but Newlove was a big turning point for St. Helens when he came into the side, and Jamie Lyne, of course, won a Man of Steel.
Yeah, it's funny. Yeah, I never think of Jamie Lyne as being a great centre, but he was.
Do you think one of the things with Jamie Lyne is he had an amazing year at Saints, but his stay in this country wasn't very long.
I was going to say, I don't know how long he was here for.
He was the first one of those ones who kind of reinvigorated their career at an age where he could still go back to the NRL and have a really good, successful spell that he had with Manly after that in the NRL too. The trailblazer for someone like Jackson Hastings now, for example.
I think for me to be aware of an opposition player, they've got to be decent for a few years.
Actually, we'll go with Scott Alexander Evans at Scott Al 31553861. Sounds like a bot, but I don't think he is, because he replied to David's tweet actually, which kind of is why it fits in this order. He said, "That's a good list. Add in Kevin Iro and a young Gary Schofield." So we're really starting to round it out there with one of the best Kiwi centres of all time, who had great spells in the early 90s with Wigan, then in the sort of early noughts with Saints and Leeds as well in between, and Gary Schofield, which Sarah, in his Hull days, he was a centre, wasn't he, really, the young Gary Schofield?
So I've heard. It's a bit before my time, really.
But you still hold the same level of resentment for him that people in Hull whose time it was hold?
Well, it's just sort of like, taught to you. And then,
Just passed down the generations.
Shoot the Rovers scum.
Yeah.
Scoey's a traitor.
Yeah, Judas, and then when he went to be coach of